we're ready to start. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Live from Toronto, this is IFA's Global Café. My name is Bruna Swerts. I'm Director of Communications at IFA, and it is my pleasure to host today's session. Please be reminded that this session is being recorded. It's also being live streamed through our Facebook channel. All resources will be posted in our page by next week. And we will also accept any questions via chat box. Please make sure to post your question in the chat box, and our moderator will address them during the Q&A session. Now I have the pleasure of handing it over to Dr. Jane Barrett, who will conduct this very enlightening and interesting conversation with Ms. Charlotte Chisoni. Jane, the floor is yours.
And thank you very much, Bruna. And I come to you today from Geneva, Switzerland. The IFA and two members of our team have been together across this week talking with the World Health Organization about our collaborations and partnerships. And it is a real pleasure to be talking with Charlotte Chisoni today because, like myself, Charlotte was awarded, we were named as one of the Healthy Aging 50. And Charlotte Chisoni has a bachelor's degree in Communication and Cultural Studies from the University of Malawi, and lots of solid experience in designing, implementing, and managing communications. But what we really want to do, first of all, Charlotte, and welcome to our Global Cafe, is really just get to know you a little bit more. So tell me about you growing up in Malawi. Tell us a little bit about Malawi and about your life in Malawi.
All right. Thank you so much, Jane, for this wonderful platform. And good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. So good to have you here and to sit down with you and to share my views and my thoughts. So like Jane already said, I am Charlotte Chisoni. I live in Malawi, Lilongwe, and sometimes Blantyre. So I grew up for the most part in the southern region of Malawi, and then in the central region, and then I'm now back to central region because of work. My life growing up was pretty okay. I grew up with parents that were better off to do, so I had a very good childhood. I got lucky to be exposed to different cultural backgrounds, and I also had the chance to go to at least better off schools than most people are exposed to. So I had a pretty good childhood. I'm the firstborn, but in a family of two, so we're twins. I'm actually a part of a twin, so yeah, that's pretty much about me. And academically, like Jen already said, I have a degree in communication and cultural studies that I obtained in 2017. So my career, what pushes?
Yeah, so Charlotte, you're the Advocacy and Communication Advisor for the Malawi Network of Older People's Organisations. Now, Malawi, as I understand, there's about 20 million people in Malawi, but it's one of the poorest countries in the world. So how did you land? How did you land into this job? You know, I think it's really important to know.
Yeah. So after graduating, so Malawi being the poorest, we're also we have the highest number of corruption cases. So it's pretty difficult to land a job without any connections. So I graduated. I sent out cover letters to different organizations. So I got email addresses of somebody had compiled a list of almost all organizations and companies in Malawi. So I got that list. I sent out my very first cover letter, and I had been shortlisted for a digital banking intern position at a bank, CDH Investment Bank. So I was an intern for about 9 months. And then after that, the contract ended. I went back home, and then I got an opportunity to be an intern as well in the public relations department at Parliament of Malawi. So I did that for a year and 6 months. but all along I had, ever since I was in school, after attending, there was this course that was development support communication. So this course introduced us to different theories of development and communication. So in that class, I decided that in my career, I want to use communication as a tool for social change. So I had, even though I was still not in the communication sector, I still had that passion. So now it was a moment where I reflected and said, okay, how do I get to what I want to be? So I started enrolling in different courses. So I'm part of the Young African Leaders Initiative network. They offer a variety of online courses on a number of topics. So I started searching on courses that were in line with what I wanted to do, with where I wanted to take my career. So I took courses in community organizing for action. I also took courses in effective communication for healthy outcomes. And then I also applied to be a fellow in the Young African Leaders Initiative Regional Leader Fellowship course in civic engagement, because I really wanted to get in the civic space. Yeah. So, yeah.
So, Charlotte, I want to just take you back to a little way where you talked about you doing an internship, in Parliament. So to what degree did that influence your decision to want to be, in a leadership position and to be an activist? Can you talk about that, and then we'll move on to your current work?
Yeah. So working in Parliament, I was exposed to different. So I used to attend. We called them. They are called parliamentary committees. So being talking about what they do and seeing the work that they were doing, the difference they were making in the community. The passion was still there. Like, you know what, I need to be there. I don't want to be in corporate communications, but I want to be there in the ground, making the actual change. So learning of all that, I also want to be there. I want to be the one making the actual change.
Okay, so you really have a real unique insight, into decision makers, their role, how they do it, and then you really activated your interest through some formal qualifications, and now you're working at the Malawi network of older people organisations, and particularly your work at Advocacy and Communication Advisor. So talk with us a little bit about this and about your passion when it comes to ageism, because that's what you are nominated for. Your work training journalists about ageism. So perhaps you can talk a little bit about that.
All right. So at first I joined this position. When I joined this position, I wasn't really thinking about ageism. For me, it was just a chance to get into the communications field. But then after I started this work, so my grandmother was alive by then. So the experiences that my mom was going through taking care of her, they started creating a passion in me, seeing so the situation was she had dementia, but Malawi is the health sector in Malawi isn't fully developed. That I would tell you that we don't even have a Chichewa word in our language for the word dementia. Mental health issues are not that talked about in Malawi, because when you bring out issues of mental health, mostly you're told that those are first world problems, because our immediate problems are finding food, getting how to get by. So all the experiences that my mom was going through, because she struggled to find somebody to actually sit down with my grandmother, to talk with her, to even hospital that was able to diagnose her and help her with medicine and every sort of care that she needed. it was very difficult. So those experiences now, and then seeing that I was in an organization that that aims to promote the rights and welfare of other persons. Now I started thinking of how I can make a difference in other person's life. So now what started as just a job for me grew into a passion. Like, okay, I need to do something. I'm in a position that I can make a difference in the lives of other persons, not only my grandmother, but other persons that might be going through similar experiences. Thank you.
You know, I just want to stop you there for a moment, because researching to talk with you today, you know, I came across a figure: 51% of people in Malawi live below the poverty line, and 26%
Yes.
live below the extreme poverty line. And I think what you
Yes.
said about the health systems not being fully developed, you know, is a really important point. And the fact that you don't even have a word about dementia, and dementia is a first world problem. I think it's really important for our Global Cafe attendees to really sort of hang on. You know, this is the world that you live in, and so your fight against ageism may look slightly different. So talk with us about the way that you work with journalists. I think it's fascinating.
All right. Ageism in Malawi. So I'll just talk about ageism from the perspective of Malawi and maybe Africa. So in Malawi, ageism can be categorized in interpersonal ageism that occurs with social interactions, and internalized ageism that occurs within the person. But for when you talk about interpersonal ageism, socially, other persons in Malawi are victims of witchcraft accusations and violence, violence stemming from land property grabbing, because land used to be, we used to have customary land that was owned by that was given to people from a long time ago. So violence in other persons stems from such, because our culture, so understand this, our culture is a collectivist culture where we believe in the power of community, the importance of community, and most Malawians view the world through the Ubuntu ideology, where we say I am because we are. But something of interest is that there's a time where with Oxfam and Helpage International, we did a study on improving the lives of other persons living with incontinence. So we actually found that people are okay taking care of other persons in their homes, but if they believe that the incontinence came came because they are practicing witchcraft, or they have been bewitched, or there were cases involved, they would cut the care. So you see, everything to do with other persons in Malawi is somehow linked, not everything, but most things to do with other persons in Malawi are linked to witchcraft accusations. Like I also mentioned about dementia. So because in Malawi, people recognize dementia. Maybe it's down. People, the best word people can use to describe dementia is forgetfulness, but people are not really educated about the signs and symptoms of dementia. And I don't know if when you're doing your research, if you came across that Malawi, the literacy rate is at about 65%. That's just people who know how to read and write, but these are not people that are exposed to be able to research some of these things, you know. So you'd find that some signs and symptoms of dementia are actually people see them as behaviors of witchcraft and witches. There was actually a study that was done in Uganda where those perceptions are linked to somebody being a witch. You know how dementia manifests. Somebody can have hallucinations. The moment somebody sees that, they think maybe they are talking to spirits, and it's so normalized to the extent that for us growing up, and for most people growing up, it is just in our minds that when somebody has aged, they practice witchcraft in some way or the other, where even if somebody is over the age of 70, people start to wonder, like, why are they not dying? Like, it's so normal for people to die so young that when they see somebody at a witch doctor to prolong their life, minds, yeah. So
Yeah.
Collecting case stories and success stories of the projects that we do. So one day, sitting down with a woman, we were talking about how one of our social protection projects is helping her everyday life. So she mentioned something in the tune of, the project is helping. I'm aware of my rights as an older person, that I have the right to life, the right to health, but I still don't feel good, because every time I hear of an older person in the media, it's because they were a victim of witchcraft accusations. So that was an oh moment for me, like, okay, yeah, this is something that I had never even thought of, So being a communication student, I had heard about positive media representation and media representation at large, how it has an effect on the attitudes and perceptions of the community and oneself. But it's not something that I had thought of in my context and in my field. So hearing this woman say this, I started to think that, okay, I started to ponder over her words, let me say, and then I went back to the office, and we usually keep a database of any issue that has been covered on other persons, so that we can keep our statistics in check. And I went back to the database, the newspapers and the online content, and I really noticed that most of the things that we keep, most of the stories that have been covered about other persons are in the negative light. It's either an other person was killed, an other person was victimized in one way or the other, or issues of vulnerability where another person is living in acute poverty and they need help, but there's nothing shedding positive light on other persons. So this was the moment of now realizing that, okay, there's something that needs to be done, because if this woman can express to me that even though she's aware of her rights, she still doesn't feel good, because every time she's seeing other persons being mentioned, it's because they're being accused of such a thing. It means some other persons can actually are also experiencing the same thing. And it's the same, like I said, my passions also stemmed from the life of my grandmother. And I remember that there's sometimes my grandmother would mention things like, when I get old, you might start rejecting me, saying I'm doing all this. Like, it's something that goes into the minds of other persons that, maybe people look at me in this way. So this is a moment of reflection and a moment that.
So let's just pause there for a minute and actually just play the story, because you're living in one of the poorest countries of the world. The health systems are not fully developed. There is a societal perception that growing older is a bad thing. So the ageist perspective societally is very much present. You have real life evidence about your mother, your grandmother, and you really, what you said to me then is that you listened to the story of an older person. And, the power of storytelling is becoming more and more evident, as a mechanism to actually change policy. You also mentioned you know,
Yes.
the types of ageism, and we know from the WHO report, there's, you know, interpersonal, there's self-identifying, and there's institutional. And you talked about this interpersonal. Now, you know, the title of this session today is Undoing Ageism Using the Power of Media. So what was the next step in your journey to really undo ageism in your society?
Yes. So after this realization, I sat down with our executive director. We talked about it, like, you know, these perceptions, even though we are doing this work, we are trying to get, we're trying to improve community awareness on other persons for their lives, for their quality of lives to be improved, but there's still this area that is obviously lacking. So we sat down and we pondered on what we can do, and that's when, because I like I said, I had known about positive media representation, so I started to read more about it, to see how, to see what something that we can do. So I came across a lot of interventions where media representation had changed the way people feel about different marginalized groups. Talk of people of color, different body shapes, religion, people in the LGBTQA community. So for me, this was like, if it can be done, if it can be done for other marginalized groups, and they're actually seeing results, maybe this is something that we can also look into in the aging sector. So this was where now the idea was born. Yeah. So what was left, so we organized the trainings. First, we had a training in Blantyre with media houses in Blantyre. So the first training, we had over 10 representations from 10 media houses, where now I wanted to train them on improving their coverage on other persons. And something that was very interesting was the very first question that I posed to the reporters and journalists on the day of training was, as somebody in the mainstream media, have you ever reported or come across a story, a positive story on other persons? And it was actually alarming to hear that almost 90% said other person, or they have never actually come across a story. So that was very enlightening to say that, okay, yeah, so this is really a problem. And for them, their reasons were, no, positive news doesn't sell, so would rather not report positively about that. And also it was that there is no motivation for them to post positive stories to do with other persons. So we started the training. So this training from Blantyre was really fruitful. We decided that as my neighbor and as my office, I will take an active role in informing journalists of positive instances, because we do have positive stories. From when I collect success stories, they're success stories because they are showing that other persons are valuable members of the community. We have what we call other persons associations, where they're doing really impactful things in their communities. We have other persons that are setting up businesses, other persons that are, you know, changing the narrative. We had other persons that were able to stand up for themselves, to meet different people in different service providers, in hospitals, in ADMAC. That's where people get means to say, we want how other persons are treated when they come to these places to be better. So they were able to fight for themselves, and were able to change policies in those spaces to say, when another person comes, they don't have to stand in a queue. So those are positive stories that as an organization, we're able to collect. So we created a press gallery that, to make it easier to share information, to share positive stories, so that the journalists, the reporters can have easy access to such types of stories, so that it would be easier for them to cover stories to do with other persons. So after the success, we created a press gallery, and now it was me sending the stories. Every time we go to the field, we collect success stories. I would document them and also send them to the press gallery, so that they can also be covered.
So Charlotte,
So
we've now opened up,
forward,
moving forward. Tell us about moving forward, because I know that there's going to be some questions from our cafe audience today. So moving forward, what are you going to do?
Yeah, so moving forward, we have actually had another success where in the first week of October, we actually, so after we set up the press gallery, we set up a press gallery for Blantyre, for Mzuzu, and for Lilongwe. Those are the major cities in Malawi. So I also sat down with my executive director to say, okay, so how are we still going to motivate reporters and journalists to continue covering stories? Because we need the positive representation in the media. I'll give you an example of there's a time in Malawi, we have Gides Chalamanda. He is 90. He's 90 now. He is one of the celebrated musicians in Malawi, and he actually hit over 80 million views on TikTok with his hit song Lini Ho. If you can search it, it's actually a very good song. So when this happened, a lot of other persons, when you talk to other persons, you'd see the pride in them saying, we knew Gides Chalamanda growing up, So seeing how this man, Gides Chalamanda, had a positive impact on other persons, where they would relate to somebody, they're seeing somebody, they have like a role model that they can point to, and giving them a feeling of belonging. Yeah, that's when we decided that this is something that we need to do. We need positive stories in the media. So we sat down with the what is called the Media Institute of Southern Africa, Malawi chapter, that's called MISA Malawi. So in our talking, MISA Malawi hosts what are called the media awards that honor different journalists that report in different sectors. They have awards in corruption issues, in water and sanitation. So we also sat down with them to say, we still want a lot of journalists reporting about other persons in their positive light. So we sat down and we were able to sign a memorandum of understanding, which was signed that was on 5th October. So we have also introduced an elderly category, where now we would like to highlight stories of impact and change to do with other persons. So with this, we believe that it's going to be an active decision now to include stories of other persons. Now we are shifting from the other way of covering elderly issues, where there are more of stories from a person of vulnerability. Now we have a more focused and strategic approach. Yeah.
Okay, so Charlotte, I'm going to ask Mark Venning to make a comment in a couple of minutes about, language and talking about older people. I know, Mark, you had a great conversation with Bruna yesterday, so I'll come to you in just a minute. But Charlotte, I want to just see whether you have a vision. If we can transport ourselves to 2030, and that's at the end of the decade of healthy aging, what are the opportunities of taking the model that you have developed in Malawi with the media and just expand it around the world? It seems to me that you have a number of media outlets that are interested. I wonder whether we can take that and really blow it up and connect media outlets, because what you said to me is very interesting. They don't sell papers, these positive stories, right? And they're not very interesting. You know, perhaps we need
Yes.
to sort of flip that around. So just your comment,
Yeah.
and then I'm going to go to Mark to ask for a comment on him. So, Charlotte?
Yeah, so yeah, that would be a very good initiative. Like I said, I also took this initiative from other movements that had been happening, and I can actually say it's one of the best practices that we have done. And by May, that's when we'll have the first awards. I believe we're going to see a difference, because when we shared this news with journalists, most of them seem to be eager to, to start digging positive stories. So we believe there's going to be a shift in the way even other persons see themselves. Yeah, so going forward, I do believe that we will have a very good success story, and I would be glad to share it with other countries as well, because this is something that the problem is there. So we really need we really need a solution that is working. So yeah.
I know that, you know, Margaret Gillis and Kieran Rabaroo and many other experts in Canada and their organisations are moving forward with, together with IFA, you know, Canadian Coalition Against Ageism. So I'd like to think that we could be in touch with you to actually understand that model. I want to now turn to Mark Venning. Mark, would you just like to make a comment about, you know, the power of media, language, talking older people?
Well, thanks for putting me on the spot.
You can handle it, Mark, all right?
I'm sure. Yes, it's only 7 o'clock in the morning. Well, I think the conversation I was having with Bruna yesterday was pretty wide ranging, but what strikes me is that after sitting in every IFA cafe for the last 2.5, almost 3 years, the cultural differences in language is what strikes me. So certain words we use in the media or even our regular conversations, even on these sessions, is pretty wide ranging. So in certain countries, we'll use the word like elderly, for example. And in some contexts, that word is quite damaging, you know. There's one example of that in the media. If you listen to a traffic report about a woman being hit by a car, an elderly woman, 62, was hit by, I mean, what the heck are you talking about? So when I was looking at the Malawi population life expectancy just a minute ago, it's only 65. So what's elderly in Malawi is different than what's elderly in somewhere else. So there's all how to become universal is a very difficult thing, and Jay, you've commented on this several times as well. So that's just some opening gambit.
Look, thanks for that, Mark. And 7 o'clock is easy for you, so you're quite eloquent at any time. So, Charlotte, you know, is it valuable to think about the words that we use? And I think it is older, elderly, age. But in Malawi, what is the language that's used?
Yeah, so I was gonna comment to say, I think first of all, we don't think about we really have never put so much thought into the English words, because English is not our first language. So, but for Malawi, I'll give an example. We have different words also that that refer to other persons, but there's a word, it's called Mkalamba. It is also seen as a slur, you know. Most other persons like to be referred to as Ajikulile, because that gives a little bit of that gives a certain level of respect. Well, when you're saying Kalamba, it's sort of like it's sort of like a slur for another person. So I do understand where you're coming from. We also have, most times when we interact with people in the community, we also have that issue where we try to correct them every time to say, no, don't use the word Kalamba, you know. So yeah, it is important it is important for other persons also, for the way they see themselves, the way they feel about themselves, from the language that you use, because you call somebody in Kalamba, they automatically think you are painting them in a negative way. So yeah, the use of language is really important, and it's really something that we need to put into consideration when we refer to older people.
Charlotte, I'm going to ask in a minute for you to talk about your work around the African plan, you know, as an activist. Now, this is actually, you know, quite a short time in your career. You've recognized a problem, you've become passionate, and you're really driving change. So before I ask you to comment on that, could I ask someone at the IFA to locate the WHO Global Report on Ageism and all of the campaign material, which is free, and put it in the chat box, because we need to actually use what's effective in campaigning. So if you could do that. Now, Charlotte, your work as an activist in implementing or driving, you know, towards an African plan. Can you talk a little bit about this?
Can you come again, please?
You know, you have been involved, you know, in the African plan. So you've done a lot of work in terms of, you know, the next generation leaders, academy fellow, but also Young African Leaders Initiative. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. Career-wise, in the next 5 years, I hope to have attained a master's in media and social change. So after I attend this master's, I actually want to get into campaigning now for social change, where I want to create sustainable campaigns, because that's also a gap in my country, where campaigns are not I wouldn't say that some campaigns are not performing well as they should, mostly health campaigns and what have you. So I want to get into creating campaigns. So firstly for Malawi, because I really want to make an impact in my country, but that's something that I can also I'll also look into creating also sustainable campaigns for Africa that are actually driving social change.
Okay, so can you tell us a little bit, you work for the Malawi Network of Older People's Organisations. What are the key issues that this network is working on at the present time?
So we have a number of projects. First of all, we have our, I would say, flagship project is the accountability and fulfillment for older persons to raise their dignity. This is where, in partner with Helbage International, where we want older persons to take a leading role in fighting for their rights and speaking for themselves, and to realize realize their rights. So it's more of a social protection project. We also have projects in the health sector. We have one that is funded by UKAID, that's on cataract, because cataract is the leading cause of blindness in Malawi. So we are working around early diagnosis and cataract surgery. So we work with we're currently working with 17 district hospitals in Malawi so we have people in the community that identify cataract cases, and they bring them up to the district hospitals for surgeries. We also have another project that is funded by the Commonwealth, that is so this one is not that different with the Afford project, but this one is mainly on fast tracking the assignment of the older person's bill. So with this one, we sit down with decision makers and other other CSOs and other government ministries so that we can fast track the assenting of the bill, of the other person's bill. We also have an act that is being carried out in Zomba. That's and it's funded by SADC. That is on HIV/AIDS adherence and let me say ART adherence in the 50+ population, where so many interventions on HIV/AIDS in Malawi are created for the youth and for middle-aged people, where now HIV, because of ARTs, people are living longer, but there was no plan to actually help these people when they get to 50+ to actually also support them. So we are, and also the context in Malawi, or the assumption is that when people get to be 50+, they are now longer, I would say, sexually active to a point where they most interventions, sexual reproductive health rights do not incorporate other persons. So it turns out that the 50+ generation now has been suffering because they are not included in such interventions. So this project is seeking to address that.
Charlotte, before you go on, we have a question from Shmuel, and thank you, Shmuel. You're an active participator on these global cafes. I think you have answered this, Charlotte, but important to pose the question. How could the power of media support better integration of older adult populations in society? I think really you talked a lot about the positive storytelling, didn't you?
Yeah. Yeah, like I mentioned, we would like other persons to also take a leading role for fighting for their rights, and having positive representation in the media will also change how they feel. We hope that they will feel that they're valuable members of the community, and that self-esteem now will help in them actually taking the active role, because now it's not there because they feel they are not needed. They feel nobody will take them seriously. Nobody will value their concerns. So the power of media, the power of positive media representation will help in this to change will help to change participation in different areas of development.
You know, Charlotte, this is a personal question, and it's really, you know, how did, you know, when you were told of the news that you were one of those, healthy aging 50s, you know, what did it mean to you to be nominated and to receive this recognition?
Well, it was actually, I really didn't think that I would get chosen. You know, I first it was an issue of what do you call this? There's I've forgotten the term for it, but I got that nomination and I was like, okay, wow, this is happening. So how do I start now using this to continue improving the lives of other persons? So I'm still processing it actually, because it's a very big platform, and for me, I'm still in disbelief, to be honest.
Well,
Yeah.
I think I'm a little bit the same, but I think from those that I've talked with, you know, this is our opportunity to use the platform to really highlight all of those people around the world that receive this. We represent hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people working in this field. So I'm going to pause there and I'm going to introduce our next week's speaker so that you can just think about what are the 2 or 3 takeaway messages that you would like to convey to, our audience today. So I think I've just lost it again, Bruna. So I have great pleasure in introducing that next week, coming to your Global Cafe will be Dr. Andre Klimskog. Now, Andre is assistant professor in Warsaw School of Economics in Poland, and he comes with not only the power of expertise in social innovations in aging, but a very, very compelling personal story. So as you've seen in the last couple of Global Cafes, we're really wanting to get to know the person, because as you've heard from Charlotte today, there is something really passionate about her drive to be part of this important work in the field of aging. So join with us next week. And I am so delighted that our Director of Strategic Communications will be moderating this important session, because Bruna spent a couple of hours, talking with Andre. So it has special importance. So, come support, learn, from Andre, but also from the delights of Bruna. So thank you. I also want to share with you that across the next 12 months, we're going to be reaching out to every single person, of the Healthy Aging 50 group to see if they'll come on and have a chat with us in this Global Cafe, because they come from many varied parts of the world and they bring their experience, expertise, and they bring their passion. So it's a new format, it's a new way of being together, on every Friday. So Charlotte, it's been a real pleasure for me to get to know you just a little bit more. What I've learned from you is that it comes from a personal story that gives you the passion. Coming from and living in a country as you do, with poverty levels so high, you have a very special story to tell so that we can understand better, but also the power of the media we've often talked about in these cafes and beyond. So what you have done in engaging, gathering together and helping to drive change is standout, gold standard. And I want to come back to you as IFA, learn from you so that we can really then use this model and go around the world. So Charlotte, please tell us, what would you like to tell our audience before we all close off today?
First of all, I would like, as a young person, maybe that will sound a bit ageist, but I would just like to tell everybody to move maybe from their comfort zone, because I usually get questioned why, as a young person, I'm in the aging sector. So, like I mentioned, I'm in the next generation interview, my interview to say, don't you think you bring a little bit of confusion because you are a youth? You will be surrounded by fellow youth, most of them that are engaged in interventions to do with the youth. Don't you think that would bring a little bit of confusion? And my answer was, actually, it won't. It will actually change the perspective, because we're trying to. I also want to incorporate the intergenerational approach, where youth are also at the center of bringing to light aging issues and being activist for aging issues. And because now actually most of violence against older persons is perpetrated by the youth. So my response is usually, no, this is actually a good thing. So the first thing that I would say is a general thing to say, get out of your comfort zone, The second thing I would say, because the theme around this is about representation. So it's just an edge to say representation should not be the final goal, but it should be a step towards achieving equity. So everyone in power should take an active role, should take a conscious role in making sure that their content reflects their audiences, and that they're not they're not dimming the light of other groups of people when they carry out their work. So we should aim for our content to be inclusive. Yeah, that's all I have to say.
Charlotte, you know, you left us with some very poignant thoughts, and you really left us with a challenge, all of us. Everybody, today, get out of your comfort zone. Whatever you do, know that that's a Charlotte-ism. Also, I found it really representing should not be the final goal. This is about taking ourselves and putting ourselves into action. And that's a powerful message. And the last message is, do not dim the light on any person of any age, because they have the right to be present, contribute to society, and be engaged with everyone, regardless of their health and well-being. We all, as human beings, have the right to be engaged, to be meaningful, and to be valued and respected. So, Charlotte, you and I now are going to be friends, whether you like it or not, all right? It's been such a pleasure to meet you, and you can count on IFA to promote all of your work, and we'll be in touch in the next couple of days. And thank you for sharing such a personal story about your mother and your grandmother. So thank you very much, everybody. Stay safe, stay well, and Charlotte, we'll be together, all right? Thank you very much, everybody. All the best and have a good weekend. Bye-bye.